Hi, everyone. I'm here with the director of the Middle East Studies Center at OSU, that's the Ohio State University, Alam Payand. I'm the assistant director, I'm Melinda McClymans. Dr. Payand's been the director here since 1986. He's a scholar of the Middle East in terms of political science, history, and he does field work there every year. So great insights on the headlines as they're coming through. And right now, what we want to talk about is how crowded the airspace is in Syria these days.
Yes, it's a very important question. The airspace is becoming so crowded that Americans and Russians are talking to each other to avoid an accidental sort of that American planes or the Russian planes will become so close to each other. And at one point, even Americans protested that one of the Russian planes crossed the airspace of Syria and went over Turkey. Turkey is a member of the NATO alliance. So it seems that because the Russian planes are bombarding the opposition to the Syrian government, and Americans and Turks and many other Arabs are complaining that Russian planes are bombarding not the positions of the ISIL or Daesh. They're bombarding the position of the Free Syrian Army and other groups on the ground which are directly or indirectly supported by the United States. Right. So the space is really becoming crowded. So that's one thing. ISIL or ISIS or Daesh, the Arabic name for that, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, has become a menace, not only for the interests of Bashar al-Assad or Russia or the United States or the United Kingdom or the NATO alliance. It has become a menace for Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. All of these are scared. They were scared from Al-Qaeda, and now ISIL is even more brutal than Al-Qaeda used to be. That even Al-Qaeda is considering the actions of ISIL as brutal. Even the Taliban in Afghanistan, for example, even though some Taliban have declared their alliance in the northwest frontier of Pakistan and also in Afghanistan with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as the Caliph or Khalifa. But still there are some Taliban who think that that Daesh or ISIL is a group which is doing things which are non-Islamic. I mean, one can tell that if Taliban or Al-Qaeda considering them as brutal and radical, you can imagine that what the Arab general public. I was in United Arab Emirates and I interviewed some government officials and university professors and students. They are really scared that what this ISIL is doing, what they did to Iraq and Syria, and they are afraid that maybe there are some radical sleeping cells in United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, so that they probably will be activated. So their governments are really are scared. They do not say it publicly,
right?
But privately, there is a tremendous anxiety in all of these Gulf countries, and including Egypt and Libya. When you talk to the university professors, intellectuals, government officials, students in the universities, they're not happy with what ISIL or Daesh is doing. Some of them are afraid. They do not want to criticize it because they're very brutal. Anyone who can oppose them, they target them. So, well, Al-Qaeda was doing the same thing. Taliban are using this, terrorizing people and scaring people. So that's one of the instruments that they're using. Yeah.
They're allied with al-Nusra, right?
Well, that's a good question. So what happened? It used to be this Al-Qaeda. Now there are many. A group which is affiliated with Al Qaeda. It is Al Nusra
Okay.
in Syria, in Iraq. There is another group by the name of Khorasan, which is also a group that which is very closely uh, somehow directly or indirectly coordinating their activities. So this Khorasan group, Khorasan is the name for eastern Iran and western Afghanistan. So that used to be, and also part
Mm-hmm.
of uh, today's Balochistan and northwest Iraq. These were called Khorasan at one point. So these are the former Arab fighters that who fought against the Soviet Union forces in Afghanistan in the 10 years of the Soviet occupation. They were Arabs from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Libya, Algeria. So many of them that who could not fight against Israel in the
Mm-hmm.
Middle East.
Right.
So they went there and said, well, there is another jihad going on in Afghanistan, so let's fight. And Osama bin Laden, as a young man, probably in his early 20s, he also was one of those that who went with his friends and associates to fight against the Soviet occupation forces in Afghanistan. So these are, sometimes they are using the term, these are the Arab Afghans.
Yeah, I've heard
Have you
that
heard this term?
a
Yeah,
long time ago.
they're
Yeah.
using that. Well, they just cut their teeth in learning how to use explosives and fight. And because many of these Arab young men, probably in their whole life, they did not touch a gun or a pistol or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So Afghanistan was a somehow
Training ground.
training ground for many of them. So they went and they learned those, and they brought some of those skills to their countries. And many in Al Qaeda were the people that who were fighting against the Soviet Union forces in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan became a training ground
Mm-hmm.
in those 10 years of the Soviet occupation. And now, after almost 14 years of American involvement in Afghanistan, so there are these Arab groups.
So
Uh,
these are sort of children or grandchildren of the Cold War in a way, like all these groups, because they were fighting against the Soviets, they were armed by the US, they
no,
were motivated by different, you know, um, political reasons having to do with either being against US policy or
well, this is an important issue. So the Cold War, at the peak of the Cold War, the Soviet Union invaded. Two things happened almost simultaneously. One was the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in December of 1979, and another one was the Iranian Revolution.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So Iran, finally, Ayatollahs went there, and they're still in control in Iran. They became very anti-American, especially when they took the hostages and the United States sanctions and that sort of, until this date.
mm-hmm,
Then another one was that's the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a
mm-hmm.
almost a neutral country, did not pose any threat to the Soviet Union, but it was at the peak of the Cold War. And there are different reasons. Historians are still debating that why the Soviet Union did something which was totally uh, from World War at the end of the from end of the World War II, the Soviet Union helped other people, other groups
Mm-hmm.
which were pro-Soviet, like the Cubans, for example, or the United Arab Republic of Yemen, or
Mm-hmm.
in Afghanistan with the Afghan Communist Party, that Khalq and Parcham, when they did the coup in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
But they did not go invade another country. So Afghanistan was the first,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very unique in that way that after World War II, so the first time the Soviet armies went to Afghanistan, and that was a huge development,
Mm-hmm.
and it really shook NATO and the Western alliances, and also the
Right.
Middle Eastern Arabs and Muslims, uh, Pakistanis, and everyone. So they all could not do much except to support the resistance in Afghanistan. And that's what exactly Americans did.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that Brzezinski was walking in the boundaries between Afghanistan and Pakistan, in some cases even wearing turban and telling, yeah, the Afghan soldiers that, well, God is on your side, and this is a legitimate war, and this and that. So all sorts of things, from CIA to ISI of Pakistan,
Wow.
Arabs and Europeans and everyone supported this Afghan resistance against the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
Iran was totally lost. They didn't do much they couldn't do. But in Afghanistan, there was a nice place to really use some of the weapons, or test some of the weapons. And toward the end, Americans
Especially,
and Stingers. Yeah, yeah, the story of the Stingers given
yeah,
to the Afghan resistance, and
the
blowpipe
shoulder, the
and many
shoulder
shoulder
mounted.
carried, and weapons
Yeah.
and money. So directly and indirectly. So in a way, what today's Taliban that we see, it is the result of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan destroyed whatever balance of powers existed in these areas. It totally destroyed. So the Soviet Union left Afghanistan after 10 years of their occupation, totally left and utterly destroyed Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And that Afghanistan became a vacuum, a power vacuum, and to that power vacuum stepped groups like the Taliban and Al Qaeda and others. So this international terrorists.
So yeah, I mean, going back to U.S. and Russia, they have some competing goals as well as the shared goal of destroying ISIL. So, what are those competing goals, and how are all these different groups like Taliban, and um, I don't know, maybe some of the groups near to Syria, how are they aligning with these different goals?
Well, first of all, let us look at the most important. For the United States and the United States, the ones who are in alliance with the United States, including some of these Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and who are friends of the United States, they want Bashar al-Assad to go. That used to be the objectives of the United States. But it's not the objective of Iran and Russia.
Right.
They want Bashar al-Assad to remain in power, because the former Soviet Union and today Russia, who inherited the former Soviet Union, they have only one friendly country and have one base in Syria, in the Mediterranean. So that Russia does not want to give up that. And that they think that if someone else will become successor to Bashar al-Assad, maybe Russia will not be a force. So that's the only, they want to keep their presence that's the only place
Syria
that Russia is having some sort of foothold in the Middle East. So that's why they're willing to support Bashar al-Assad in the short run. We do not know what are the long range planning, but at this moment they're going to keep. That's why last week I think Bashar al-Assad, for the first time, he went to Russia and had series of meetings there with Putin and others. So, and Iranians also want. The Iranian issue is also that among the Sunni Arabs, they don't have many friends. And even though Syria, the majority of the Syrians are Sunni Arabs, probably about 85% are the Sunni Arabs. And the Alawite, which are a branch of the Shiites, they are only about 11 to 12%. So it's a minority Shiites ruling over the majority of the Sunnis in Syria. And that's the Iranian, it's both strategic and sectarian in the case of Iranians. It's their own Shia brethren, and to support and want them to keep in power. And this is one reason why Iranians are supporting the Houthis in Yemen. Because Houthis are also Shiites, even though they are not Imami Shiites or Jafari Shiites like the Iranians, but they are a branch of the Shiites.
They still
the Zaidi,
view Ali as the rightful successor.
Yes.